In this video, we're going to replace this 1968 range hood, which is kind of loud, with a brand new 2018 GE range hood. And the reason I'm staying with GE is that I'm hoping it's a simple swap out, or at least that's the impression I've been given by some of the videos that are out there. So let's find out if it's as simple as the videos say, and if it's something that you can do. First thing we need to do is determine how this unit is attached, and we see there's 1, 2, 3, 4 screws that have to be loosened. Then it looks like the unit will slide out. We will of course have to separate the electrical connection, and I know that in the new unit the electrical connection will have to be on the right hand side. So we go to our box and dig through it, and what I'm looking to find is the instruction manual, because we'll need that before we start doing anything. Instruction manual has registration, how to install this thing, and a little bit of hardware, some screws for mounting. After doing that, we go over and we switch off the power. Don't want to work on a live circuit, so we have to disconnect it. I'm running a trouble light from another room so I can light up this area and make it easy to work. Again, I make sure that there is no power. First tool is a screwdriver, and I loosen the 4 screws. I don't remove them all the way out because I don't want this unit to drop out. And in theory, I should just loosen them and I should be able to slide the unit forward for it to drop out. I remove the CFL light because it has a little bit of mercury in it and I don't want that to break. I also remove the grease trap filter, get that out of the way. And using a 1/4 nut driver, I'm going to release the channel rail where the wiring that comes into the unit will be exposed. And once that's opened up, I use an electrical probe to make sure that there are no hot leads in there whatsoever. Okay. I get a pair of diagonal wire cutters and snip off the black, the white. Then I get my 5/16 nut driver so I can release the ground. We check underneath the cabinet and above the vent to see if there are any other screws that we need to be concerned with. And I see that there are 2 more screws underneath where the light bulb was being held. So we'll remove those. And once again, I check, and the only screws that I'm seeing now are the ones that are just holding up the vent. So in theory, I should be able to pull forward and it should drop. But it doesn't. And why is that? Turns out that the screw heads are too big and won't let the unit drop out. So by using some duct tape, I secure the unit until I remove those screws. And once the screws are out of the way, I remove the duct tape, and sure enough, the unit comes out. Theoretically, we're halfway there. Looking at what we've exposed, we see there's the wire that needs to be on the other side. We see the exhaust opening, and we see the kind of work that went into creating it back in 1968. Closer look reveals that it's dirty in there, but that's to be expected. I make sure that the back end works, and then we take a look at our new unit. If you're going to recirculate the air in the room, then you just remove this little cover and that'll make it a recirculating unit. But if you're going to vent from the top, you have to pop out this cover. If you're going to vent from the back, which is what we're going to do, we have to take off this knockout. And we're going to have to somehow figure how to get electricity because they've only designed it to come in on one side. And unfortunately, ours needs to be on the other side. So much for buying GE to get a compatible unit with a GE. We continue our unpacking, removes the foam that's in the way, and take off the 2 grease filters. Underneath the grease filters, you'll see the dampener unit. You'll also notice it's pretty cramped in this unit. And when we come over to the right-hand side, we'll see that's the box where the electrical is, and we're going to have to access that. So there's one Phillips screw head that needs to be removed. With the screw head out of the way, we're able to lift the box out. There are two tabs that hold it on the other end. But we notice that as that lifts up, there's this channel rail, and it too is held by another screw in the back. So we're going to need to remove that screw head also. With the screw head out of the way, you'll have to lift up, pull towards you, and pivot up to get it to come out without any bending. And then the whole thing comes apart, set it aside. And there's your black and white lead, and this is what you'll hook up power to. And again, we won't be able to come in with power on this side. It has to go on the other side. Now onto the exhaust vent. It's a knockout, but unlike most knockouts that I've ever dealt with, these don't knock out. There's just a little bit too much metal for it to knock out. And so we struggled with this for quite a while. And what I didn't want to do is I didn't want to bend the back plate. So I got a pair of diagonal cutters and some long nose pliers. And using the two, we just started to cut the pieces of metal that were holding this in place. And in reality, this should have been much simpler to do, but for whatever reason, it wasn't designed for us to work on it easily. And maybe you know a different way around this. But again, usually knockouts, you knock them out. But again, in this case, we couldn't. So I just cut out the pieces of metal that were holding it in place. And once I had it cut on the sides and top, I then just flexed the metal back and forth until it came off. Now we get our dampener unit, and it's held by two screws. And with those out of the way, this unit lifts out. Now there's a pivot on this, and that pivot will face the front of the unit if you're venting from the top. And if you're venting from the back like we are, that is going to be facing up. So basically it's going to be the tape side down. Now what we're doing here is we're looking to see how this thing is going to align. And I only have one hole that they've given us to mount with. And we really need two. So just going to check the alignment here and see if this actually feeds through. And we quickly find out that it doesn't feed through as easily. So what I've decided to do is take the dampener off, drive this screw through, then remove it. Now it's sort of threaded itself into this piece of metal, and we'll be able to attach the dampener there. And now because I need to place a screw at the top, I'm going to get an awl and just line it up with the dampener in place and put a little punch mark on the vent. Now I got a machine screw that didn't come with this kit. It's just something I had laying around the house. And I'm using a 332 drill bit, and I'm going to put a little hole in there. Notice that the pivot side of this dampener is at the top. Don't put a lot of force on the drill because you don't want to punch through once it finishes cutting and possibly damage the dampener. It's very light, thin metal. You don't want to damage that. Once we've made our hole, I put my screw in and we secure the dampener to the back of the range hood. Finally, we remove the little yellow tape to free up the door. We look at our opening and we see it was a pretty rough job. We note that it's 2 3/4 inches from where the cord comes in to the side of the unit. So I'm going to measure that distance off on my range and also use the height difference, which is about 1.5 from the top of the range to the slot. And I'm going to mark and drill a hole on this side. Now, if I had a die tool, I actually would have just cut out a hole of the appropriate size. But being that I don't have that, once again, I'm going to use that awl and just gently put a mark so that the drill bit doesn't dance on this metal and finds a place to start drilling into. We align our drill bit and we slowly apply pressure. And it's not very thick metal, so in no time it should be able to go through. Watch your hand placement, because if you put too much pressure on the drill, you don't want the bit snapping off and it going into your hand. Once I have a little bit of a hole, I use a wood spade, which is probably not the correct tool, but again, I'm going through metal that's not that thick. And this is from a set that I got from one of the big box stores, and actually it's not that great of a set. So if I end up sacrificing this bit to create this opening, then so be it. What I found that works best is to twist the drill bit to the left, to the right, to the top, to the bottom, so that you're cutting that circle out. And it will bind at some point as it gets further into the metal. Then you're going to have to work it loose. And what I found that works best is for the final punch through is align it and then start going at a fast speed and it will cut through. Now, unfortunately, this hole wasn't quite large enough for the strain relief clamp, and you need a strain relief clamp. Without one, you risk damaging the cable and creating a short. So because our stress relief didn't fit, I used a pair of lineman pliers and just kind of rotated it and forced it to grind down the metal until the opening was big enough. We put the strain relief through and it fits, and then we attach the lock nut on it. And by the way, this doesn't come with the range hood, so this is additional hardware you're going to have to acquire. This is an interior view. We can see that it's in place, and those are the screws that we'll use to tighten to hold the cable in. We're going to take the cable, feed it along this trough here, and go to our new location. And what I've done is I've gone through my pile of stuff that I keep in the garage, and I found cables that are an exact match. And so we're going to tie the two cables together and then use an orange wire nut to get them together. And once you've tightened that down, make sure you pull on it, and the cap should not come off. So we tie black to black and white to white. And by doing this, I will get the necessary length to go over to where the power will be coming into the range hood. Again, we twist the wires together, apply the wire nut and tighten down and make sure to pull on it that it doesn't come off. Now we also have a ground wire we're going to have to deal with, so we have to make sure that we get a lead for that. And so what I did was I attached the ground wire to the frame, and now I'm going to put the wire channel back in place. Make sure the wires aren't pinched. Attach the screw that holds that together. And then on the plate that covers the end of that run, I'm going to bend the panel a little bit because I'm going to have to sneak that wire out past this panel, and I don't want there to be a sharp edge. So it'll look something like this when it's finally finished. We have the two tabs that have to catch here and here, and of course the screw that secures it. So we slip the box over the tab, over the wire channel, make sure the cables aren't being pinched, and then we drive home the screw. And when it's all done, it should look nice and clean. Two screws are in, the tabs are in the right place, and it's nicely sealed. So now I'm thinking I'm going to use my original bolts that from the old unit where the heads were too big, because I think those will work. I also kind of wiped down part of the vent, and I'm going to apply this metal duct tape to close up the opening a little bit so that it vents less in between the walls and more to the external outside of the wall. This is a metal tape from 3M. Don't use duct tape. Duct tape tends to dry out. So I will dress this and then put this cover in place so that air goes directly from the hood range right out to the exterior. And this is a tape we're using, 3M 3340 or any other suitable. Be careful with the edges because it's a metal, it will cut you. I've also taken the liberty of dressing the hood with it and sealing off around the dampener. I will also be closing off holes throughout the hood range like these and those and these. Here's my handiwork on the exhaust. It's all sealed all the way around. I quickly found out that the old hood range screw mounts don't work because there's an offset in distance. So what I have to do now is attach some wooden shims, basically pieces of wood. I'm going to have to screw those in underneath the cabinet. So I'm using some duct tape to hold those in place. Screw these into the cabinet, and then you put your mounting screws into that. It doesn't always go as planned. This is the kind of stuff you don't see in the other home videos. So in this case, I found an assistant who held the wood shims up while I screwed in. Make sure your screws are the appropriate length. Too long and you'll end up going through the underside of your cabinet. You don't want that. So attach two screws, and you'll need two shims, one on either side. And the shim has to be the thickness of the underside of the cabinet. So here we are, we've screwed in two screws for each shim. Now we take the four screws that came with the new unit, and we've measured off the distance from the back and from the side. So we're going to try to screw these in. But what I quickly found out is it's easier if you take your drill and pre-drill some holes so that it screws in better. Another challenge we faced was because of the type of board, the little holes that we had drilled were kind of hard to actually find. In the end, it turned out that we had to redo our holes because we were off. So measure 2-3 times and drill once is the lesson there. Finally, the hood slid into place. We secured it. with the 4 screws that came with the new hood. So that's in place. And as you see, there's not a lot of space to work in. So it was actually kind of a pain in the butt because the range, of course, is in the way. So you're limited in the amount of workspace you have. You know, if I had to do this again, I probably would want to take the range out of the way. Now we're going to hook up the cabling to the power. And again, that's white to white, black to black, and ground to ground. And we're going to use our wire nuts to hold everything in place. And as always, once those are tightened down, pull on them. They should not slip off. If they slip off, then you need to redo it again. Wire nuts should never be loose. And you'll find, because of the limited workspace, that this can be a challenging thing to do, and it will take a while, and sometimes the cable will slip right off. It happened to us more than once. You know, an obvious solution would be to have more cable coming out of the wall, but that presents its own issues, and you really don't want to have a lot of cable coming out of that wall. So this was the appropriate length. Again, it's just working in the confined space, and maybe if I had used the lineman pliers, but I really didn't have a lot of room to work in there, and maneuvering with my fingers gave me the most flexibility. Having said that, be careful. There are sharp edges in there. You don't want to end up cutting yourself. Eventually, we got all 3 connections, white, black, and ground. This is our path. It's out of the way. Next thing we do is we remove the packing tape that goes across the light lenses. And to remove the lenses, you push from the center towards your right and down, and it should snap out. And what they provide you with is a GU24 base CFL lamp, which is not my favorite. I would have preferred a screw-in incandescent type. So to slide it in, there are the 2 tabs. You put those in the corner and you push up. To remove the left lens, again, you push to the left and you pull down. You put in your GU24 base CFL. It just turns and snaps in. Get the tabs, line them up, and then just push up. Now we're going to switch the circuit back on so we can test to make sure that this unit is functioning correctly. Light turns on.
Turn on the fan.
And the fan, you can barely hear the fan. A big difference compared to the older unit. Even in high, it's still fairly quiet. Now we need to attach the grease filters. They have 2 tabs in the back. Align that against the frame. And then there's a lock that you push down and it should snap into place. If you don't lock it right, the whole thing falls out. So again, align the tabs, push the lock away from you and it should snap into place. And then do the same thing for the remaining grease trap. Make sure that the locking mechanism is facing down. There you go. This was the swapping out of one GE hood range for another, and it wasn't as easy as we thought it was going to be. It took a lot of these tools to help us get through this process. And maybe if you're not comfortable with all these tools, maybe this isn't the project for you. I certainly didn't think it would take as much time and effort and materials to get this job done. So if you're comfortable with all this, this could be the project for you. If not, I'd walk away from it and let somebody else do it for you. If you appreciate this video, give us a thumbs up, a comment, and as always, thank you. And if you can, please subscribe.